Nightmares. They've started again. Nightmares. The ones where something truly terrible is happening, and all you want to do is scream. The terror is so real. You can see it chasing you. You can hear its footsteps running closely behind your own. You can feel its hot breath whispering in your ear. Just one scream and it would all go away. But for some reason, you can't. It won't let you. It wants to chase you because it loves to play. She was in the basement again. She went down there every night. Sometimes she would stay down there for hours, often forgetting about me and everything else. However, I was a very curious child, as most are. So one night, I decided to take a peek. I walked over to the door, got on my hands and knees, and looked through the keyhole. Those nightmares are happening again. They've started up several months ago. Every night, like clockwork, I wake up in my bed, soaked with my own sweat, trying desperately to scream. But nothing comes out. Nothing ever comes out. At least not anymore. I couldn't tell what she was doing. I remember seeing all that red stuff on the walls. Was she painting the basement? In the middle of the night? I walked back to my room, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. When I heard the noise, I froze. The noise stopped. Footsteps rushed up the stairs, so I raced back to my room as quietly as possible and jumped into bed. My door swung open and I shut my eyes. I shut them hard, like children do when they're pretending to be asleep. I could hear my heart beating faster than it ever had before. My door quietly closed, and the basement door quietly opened. I've read that nightmares can be caused by any number of factors. Things like stress, or dehydration, or even a reaction from medication. None of those pertain to me. I knew exactly what was causing my nightmares. When I heard the lock on the basement door slide into place, I sprinted back. I looked through the keyhole again. What I saw was horrifying. It looked like she was petting something. Whatever it was lying on the bed. A bed with wheels and metal bars. She was whispering something to whatever was lying there. She said the word ready, but it sounded like a question. Trauma. It affects people in different ways. Some become reclusive and close down. Others have psychological issues like insomnia, or they become irritable. There can be physical symptoms, such as agitation or fatigue. I would have killed for those. You see, my trauma, it affected me much, much differently. Ready? She whispered as she got on top of the bed. That's when I saw what was laying there. A man. She was on top of a naked man. He was covered in the red stuff. He was leaking it too. He tried to talk through this ball thing that was in his mouth, but she was holding something shiny to his throat, and it made him squeal. Oh God, that noise. She slapped him. Then she put a finger up to her lips. Shh. Then she looked up at the door, and I swear she made eye contact with me. There are thousands of traditional methods for making nightmares go away, but they never worked for me. Nothing ever worked. Eventually, I gave up and started trying alternative methods of my own. 2 of them worked quite well, but they were only temporary. Nothing ever stuck. The nightmares would always return. Sometimes they took weeks, sometimes months, but that was only if I was lucky. I was finally at the end of my rope. Professional help was now required. The doctor came into my room, and we sat in silence. Then I was handed a single sheet of paper. It had only 1 sentence, stamped slightly off center near the top section of the page. My hands started shaking as they read the words. You know why you have nightmares. The man's hands, they were tied to both sides of the bed. She was still on top of him, but now she was moving up and down, slowly at first, then faster. She was naked now, and she was using the shiny thing to make more red stuff come out. She rubbed it all over herself. The man, he didn't look like he was enjoying this. She did, however. She let out a soft moan and then stopped moving. She leaned down to his face. In fact, it looked as if she was whispering something in his ear. After a few seconds, though, he started screaming, and when she came back up, she had his ear in her mouth. Every part of me wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Who are you? I asked pointlessly. The doctor's hands gently cupped my own. I could smell perfume on them. That scent. I knew it from somewhere. I was handed another piece of paper. This one also only had 1 sentence stamped onto it. It read, "You promised." She spat the air out and started giggling. Then she got off the man and turned out of sight. I stared at him. He looked so familiar, but I couldn't place him. He was still covered in the red stuff, so it was hard to tell. But it looked like he had markings on him, scratches even, or maybe cuts. They were all over his body. The only thing I could clearly make out was the triangle. It was carved directly into his forehead. You promised. I remembered the smell. It was the scent she wore, the one with the number 5 on the bottle, that gold liquid. She used to spray it around the house. You see, we had a crawl space just beneath our place, and animals would often get stuck under there and die. After a few days, they would start to stink. A few more days, and the house reeked of death. She was always trying to cover up the smell with the perfume. I remember watching her take long, deep breaths after she sprayed the perfume. I remember the look on her face. It was like she enjoyed the mixture of the two smells. The doctor, of course, it was her. I won't tell anyone. I already promised you that. I felt a warm breath in my ear. It startled me. She was whispering something to me, just like that man on the bed. I swear, I won't say anything. I haven't stuttered in years. She was on top of me now. I felt her put something cold and sharp on my forehead, and I felt her gently trace the shape of a triangle. I pushed her off me and felt the vibration of her hitting the ground. I felt around for something, anything that could help me end this. I reached up to the wall behind me and felt a plastic box. I opened the flap and reached inside. Something stabbed my fingertips. It was full of used needles. This sort of thing happened nightly. For months after that, every night she would put me to sleep, and every night she would go down into the basement. I couldn't watch anymore. I didn't want to see those things, and I certainly didn't want to hear those things either. As time went on, she didn't even cover his mouth anymore. She knew, and I knew. One day, after coming home from the pregnancy store, she hung a picture on my wall. I remember staring at it during those long nights. When she was down in the basement, she always turned on my nightlight so I could see it in the dark. She would tuck me in, kiss my forehead, and go down to the basement. Sometimes the screams wouldn't let me sleep. On those nights, I would draw that picture that was hanging above my nightlight over and over in my little pad of paper with my little crayons. I managed to grab one of the needles. I could feel her eyes watching me. I promise I won't speak of it to anyone, I whispered. I gripped the needle hard, and my tongue harder. My hand shook as I stuck the dirty needle inside my mouth and started stabbing at the base of my tongue. I had to pierce it several times before the blood spurted everywhere and loosened my grip. I must have punctured it over 1,000 times. I felt the needle slipping away and started coughing and choking on my own blood as I felt it slide down into my throat. Every cough made me stab the needle further into my tongue. I wasn't sure how much was left, so I tried to close my mouth. Half of my shredded tongue was dangling outside my lips. I needed this to be over. I stuck it out, as far as it could possibly go. And then I bit. I bit with everything I had in me. One bite wasn't enough. I had to chew on my own half-severed tongue before I felt it let go. I wasn't able to hear the wet flesh against the tile this time, but I knew I had done it. I finally closed my mouth and felt the blood trickling down my neck. I dropped the needle and got back into bed. She placed something in my hand, then lifted the covers, tucked me in, and kissed my forehead. I felt the door shut. The paper she had given me was still resting on the sheets, but now they were soaked with blood. I grabbed one and brought out the crayon she had handed me. On those nights, while I listened to the screaming and the moaning drifting up from the basement, I would stare at that framed picture of the 3 happy faces, each equally spaced from one another, each doing something different with their hands. She always pointed to the last one before she left the room, before she went down to the basement. Each face had 3 words beneath them. See no evil. Hear no evil. Speak no evil. They were all smiling. Dictated, but not read.